Morning, everyone. This is Sunday, and I thought since I was up, have no plans, that we can spend a little time together. But I think it's time to get you at my level, or at least try to get you at my level. Being Sunday, let's talk spiritual stuff. I have a PhD in divinity. Divinity is the spiritual side, if you will, of theology. Theology is the movement and the areas of a person, in this case, Jesus and the disciples, movement, where they go, and so on and so forth. Divinity, on the other hand, is that plus the focus that I focused on was spirituality. So I have a PhD in spirituality of the theology. Okay, I know it's confusing. So let's talk spiritual stuff. God. There's words like God. The word God is derived from the Hebrew word meaning power, might, strength. It's an L, E-L. So God is equal to L, and L by definition is power, might, and strength. Anything, all things that is powerful, mighty, and strength, that has strength to it, can be classified as a God. A God is power. We use God in the sense of Jesus being a God, Satan as a God, and so on and so forth, because they're powerful, mighty, and strength within themselves. L. However, please understand when you use the word God, it is interchangeable, but it is not what you think it is. Meaning, on this Sunday, the first day of the week, you would think that as being the first day of the week, okay. Where I'm going with that is we have to understand words. So there's God, there is a Lord, then there's angels, then there's cherubims, then there is archangels, then there's virtues, then there's powers and things that is in high spiritual things. Those are the things that I'm referring to. So let's bring some understanding to this. I'm hesitating because it's just one of those things you don't talk about publicly. But what do I have to lose? The God that created Adam and woman, that God created all things. The trees, the grass, every living thing, the solar systems, everything. That God created man, and from man made woman. And those that God was walking with Adam and woman in the coolness of the day, as it called it. That God that was walking with Adam, there was also another type of God. We call him the serpent. That serpent was giving instructions to the woman contrary. And again, the reason it's a serpent is Moses was referring to its character as being a serpent, not the actual form of itself being a serpent. Excuse me. That serpent got to the woman and went contrary to the original God of creation of man and woman, got to the woman, and then the woman got to the man. Okay, so I don't want to get into that, but let's get into the truth. That God punished all of them, making that God over the serpent. So that was a God versus a God that is lower. Let's call it Lord. And in this context, that original creating God kicked man and woman out of the garden, put some spiritual things with swords, cherubims, I think it was called, or cherubims. But they put them outside the garden. Okay, we know that. Very elementary. But here's what you don't realize. That Adam and Eve now had two children, and they were giving a sacrifice to a God, a Lord, a God. Who were they giving offerings to if the God of creation was in the Garden of Eden still? If the God of Eden was in the garden and they couldn't get into the garden and they're now out of the garden, who are they now worshiping? Well, quite honestly, it's another God. It's a kind of God that will have a feeling if you don't give it what it wants, like a blood offering versus good vegetables and fruits. Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Cain then tells God, that God, they're going to kill me if you let me go. And he puts a mark on him. It's a mark, very similar to Revelation's vision where you have a mark of the beast. But I don't want to get into that. But then Cain has a mark, and then he puts a mark, and then that mark protects him. So there's a protection. He protects Cain. And then that God is, where did that God go? I don't know. Well, it just went somewhere. So you have now two gods. You have a God of creation, and then you have a God that protected Cain and Abel and protected Cain. It's a protection. It's a marking. It's a form, if you will. I don't want to get into it. Anyway, so now fast forward to that. Then you have Abraham, his God. No, you have Moses God. Yeah, Moses God. Moses God then comes and takes a group of slaves and put them in the Garden of Eden. And then Moses God then instructs Moses and Joshua to go and kill. Well, even before the killing, let's talk about Moses God. What God tells a group of guys to go and prep a group of people for the firstborn to die? What God kills the firstborn? Just to show a point. Well, contrary to belief, government said it was okay for you to kill your firstborn, and then the government came back and says, oh, no, you can't kill your firstborn no more. We need firstborns now. So we're killing firstborns no matter what you're doing. Somebody's firstborn is dying. And so that God said, kill the firstborn. So that's that kind of God. And then the God says later on in these stories to get your military guys ready because you're going to go and take milk and honey. That God of Moses didn't have them go to a land, prep the land, prepare the land, and build up on that land. No. That God says get a military going, go across to somebody who's already got milk and honey, and then destroy them and take their milk and honey. Well, that's the kind of God a lot of people are still following to this day. They're following, I'm going to go over where someone who has something that I want, and I'm going to see if I can take it from them. And that's Moses' God. Then you have Abraham's God. Abraham's God is a Lord, is that kind of God. So I bring this out just so we can all have a clearer understanding of the confusion that we have. And that's just one type of book. That's just from an Old Testament book, the Torah. Let's not get into the father position in New Testament. Let's not get into Shiva. I think it's Shiva. In India and Hinduism and there's a lot of all these gods out there. There's multiple gods everywhere. So the question is today, where is the original creator God? The original creator God is still in the Garden of Eden. The other gods are the Moses God, the Cain God, the Abraham God, and the other gods. Now, where does this multiple gods position come from? Well, it comes from Egypt, of course. And then you have Greek mythology, but everyone knows that Greek stuff came from Egypt, and Greek just retitled it as typical Greek. And so in this context, one thing we need to understand is when we serve a God, we have positions. Now, here's how tricky it is when we serve God. It's just how tricky it is. Moses, God wrote, on the seventh day, rest. That's Moses, God. Then somebody said, well, if you work 6 days and the seventh day is on a Tuesday, then it's okay for you to worship. It's okay to worship on a Tuesday. Somebody said that. And that somebody who said that is ultimately saying the Satan, the not just Satan, the serpent. Thank you. It's just like the serpent. If you work 7 days and the seventh day just so happened to be on a Tuesday, it's okay. Worship on a Tuesday. That's the serpent. The serpent said the same damn thing as the serpent said it against the creation of God. You're not going to die. Surely you're not going to die if you eat of this forbidden fruit. And so, yeah, so people are following a different type of God now. No one really, I know, but no one really knows the type of God that they're serving because it's so confusing. And they try to make you believe that you're supposed to serve one person. And that one person is a God, even though very clearly that Revelation said that that one person is in the midst of the elders, and that one person who's in the midst of the elders went and got the scroll with the seven seals from the one that's on he who sits on the throne, because it's he who sits on the throne. Don't take it up with me. I didn't write it. He who sits on the throne, and then he then went through the process of the seven seals. But how is the one person a true if he's taking something from he who sits on the throne? And he who sits on the throne is supposed to be that one powerful one. But that one powerful one is in heaven. Meaning, it's in heaven. It wasn't the one who was walking in the coolness of the day with Adam and woman. Anyway, I just wanted to bring this out to let you know how confusing spirituality really is. And even just serving a God is very, very confusing. And I just wanted to bring this out. When you worship, you worship a God. Okay, you can put a form of a cross, a fish, a statue. It doesn't matter. When you worship, you're worshiping a God. That God is within you. It's the breath that is within you. You can say it's the breath, but the breath in itself is what's in you, the breath that is in you. Now, what does that simply mean? That simply means if I wanted to see what God you're worshiping, you're serving, I can see your character in your physical form. I can see how you act because your body doesn't have an act. It doesn't move. Your body's like a car. Your car is a form. It has a A heart, we call it an engine. It has blood called the fluids that's flowing through it, and so on and so forth. There's a car. It's just a form. When that car moves, there is a spirit, there's a soul that gets in the car, and there's electricity that runs through it, and then it moves. Okay, in this analogy, when you move, when you and I move, you can see the character of that person in context. You can see that person, and then you can see what other form that person is associated with. That's how you can tell. Very easy though. So in context, how do I know who they worship? I may not know the name of the very thing that they worship, because after all, they can give it any name, but their character is their character. But if they act a certain way, that's how you know. If it's a good acting, then they're trying to follow a good type of spirit. If it's a bad acting, it's a different type of spirit. If they go out and they take somebody else's milk and honey, then they're serving a certain type of God. If they're trying to be a good and part of the universe and part of nature, then they're serving another type of God. You can't do and serve any God you want. You just have to serve a God, and that God is within you, not external of you. Spiritual is very dangerous also, because if a person doesn't understand the nature of in you versus exterior of you, then how could you really understand that? In the one story in New Testament, when Jesus saw this man, he says, we are legions, in him is legions. And then you notice, if you read the story very clearly, once Jesus recognized, what is your name? We're legions. Recognize that Jesus didn't say nothing after that. He just stood there. It was the man who had the legions was instructing Jesus what to do. That's how dangerous these things can be. That the Jesus you're trying to emulate and worship and serve is the very one who didn't say anything when it came to those legions. In fact, when the legion says, don't put us in this place, put us over there, Jesus did it. He put them over where they said, go. But who's serving who? Who's serving who is the question. Is Jesus supposed to be this all-powerful, almighty thing? If he is, why didn't he control the situation, the environment of the situation? He couldn't, because these things are extremely powerful. This is spirituality. There is a third of the angels that came from heaven. A third. You think a third is a little bitty thing. No, a third of the global world came from heaven. And those that comes from heaven, we do not fight against the flesh. So we understand that. But we fight against the very things, the principalities, the evils of high places. You're not fighting them. You're not fighting some of them just like Jesus didn't fight some of them. Jesus could kicked out some demons, and some you can kick out with praying and fasting. But then there are some you better not talk to. You just pay attention and you follow their lead. Just like a God. If the Creator God kicks you out the Garden of Eden, that's okay. We'll serve a God who can give a mark on my head, give me a mark and give me protection. And if that God is not good enough for you, okay, let's go to another God, and that God will kill others firstborn, protect you, and then allow you the strength to go ahead and kill another group of people, and so you can take over their milk and honey, not create your own, but just take over somebody else's. And if that's too hard for you, then just go to another God. The other God is like Abraham's God. I'll just bless you and bless you and bless you. But just be careful. The reason I say just be careful is because spirituality is, to a lot of people, a belief, meaning there's no evidence of it. There's no evidence of me worshiping something on a Sunday being the first day of the week versus a Saturday being the last day of the week. So there's no evidence of any wrongdoing on the first day of the week. Okay. But then there are those who actually has evidence and knows how to do rituals and knows how to do these things. Be careful with them. They have evidence. Okay. And I'll give you a story that I ran up into when I was a younger me. There was a Christian, and then there was a man who wasn't a Christian, but let's call him a voodoo. The Christian was always saying to the voodoo in this setting, you can't voodoo me. I don't believe you can voodoo me. You can't voodoo me. And then after they stopped arguing, I walked into the Christian and I asked the Christian, are you married? He said, yes. And I said, have you ever had any lust after another woman? He said, of course, yes. And I said, that crack that you created is the crack that the voodoo can send a spirit in you. You can believe it or not, it's irrelevant of your belief. The fact that you are sinning, the fact that you've sinned has a crack in your relations between the God that protects you and you. And that crack that you have between you and that God isn't allowing that will allow another spirit to come in and interrupt. How will they interrupt? I don't know. They just do. It's very complicated. Very, very complicated. Very complicated. Very easy if you're having the calling for it, but very complicated to understand, to believe. But it's in your face. Read it in the King James Bible. Read it in the Torah. Read it in any writings. Multiple gods in this world has always been in existence. But it was only a short period of time when they decided to be dedicated to only one of those gods. And even Moses says, do not have another God before me, should let you know that there are other gods. So there has to be a dedication, a relations between you and that one God. And when there's a relationship, an established relationship, that God then can protect you, give you the power to take over somebody else's milk and honey, and so on and so forth. But that dedication must be absolute. Because if you don't have an absolute dedication, then that's worse. Because not only will you allow another destruction to come into your life, but you also have that very God that you dedicated yourself jealous. So you have his jealousy. I say his, you know what I mean. Jealousy over you. And then you have other gods that's going to come in. The story in light is a New Testament story, if you will, for a story, if you need a story. You can clean out one evilness. But if you piss off that one evilness and you don't replace it with something else, then 7 times, I believe it's 7 times or more worse, is coming upon you. So there's a creating There's a protecting. There is killing and taking over. And then there is others. Pick one. Dedicate yourself to it. And if you do, but you're still worshiping today on the first day of the week. All right, guys. Have a good one.